I'm Charlie Saunier from the Renegades of Puck, and this is the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. The NHL passes a new rule prohibiting body contact on face-offs. It also mandates that during playoffs, backup goalies must be on the bench and in uniform. The Hall of Fame adds 7 men, including Doug Bentley, Bill Durnan, Babe Siebert, and Jack Stewart. A new trophy is cast in the name of Conn Smythe. It will be given to the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Canadiens manager Frank Selke retires and is replaced by Sam Pollock, who will build another dynasty in Montreal. The Habs lose 33-year-old Bernie Geoffrion, who retires after 14 years to coach the Quebec Aces of the AHL. The Rangers debut the NHL's first Swedish player, Ulf Sterner. Detroit signs 39-year-old Ted Lindsay, but after 4 years of retirement, Lindsay's production is modest, 14 goals in 69 games. Terry Sawchuk is drafted by Toronto, where he pairs with 40-year-old Johnny Bower. In New York, Jacques Plante loses the number 1 spot to Marcel Pye. Dickie Moore, 33, attempts a comeback in Toronto after a 1-year retirement, but the former scoring ace nets just 2 goals in 38 games. Detroit finishes with the best record in the league, 40-23-7, 4 points ahead of second-place Montreal. Chicago center Stan Mikita captures his second straight scoring title with 87 points. The NHL crowns a new goal-scoring king as Norm Ullman lights the lamp 42 times for the first-place Red Wings. Norm Ullman is second in points, followed by teammate Gordie Howe, 76, and Chicago's Bobby Hull, 71. Bobby Hull, 39 goals, Gordie Howe, 29, Stan Mikita, 28, and Montreal's Claude Provost, 27, round out the top 5 goal scorers. Toronto's Carl Brewer, with 177 penalty minutes, leads the league in penalty time, but Detroit's Ted Lindsay with 173 is as feisty as ever. With Terry Sawchuk gone to the Leafs, the Red Wings rely on Roger Crozier full-time, and he leads the NHL in wins with 40 and shutouts with 6. In Toronto, the goaltending of Terry Sawchuk and Johnny Bower, who leads the NHL with 2.38 goals against average, helps the Leafs finish in 4th place. Boston finishes in last place for the 5th straight year, despite the scoring of Johnny Busick, 55 points, and Murray Oliver, 43 points. In his first full season, Phil Esposito scores 23 goals for Chicago. The Hawks also debut Dennis Hull, a hard-shooting left winger who's the brother of Bobby Hull. The playoffs feature Montreal versus Toronto and Chicago versus Detroit. Detroit sniper Norm Ullman sets a playoff record with 2 goals in 5 seconds versus the Hawks. After dropping the first 2 games, the Hawks force the series to 7 games. Chicago then wins in Detroit 4-2 to advance to the finals. Montreal wins 2 games at home to open the semifinal series, with Toronto then drops 2 in Maple Leaf Gardens. Montreal wins Game 5 at home, then wins the decisive game in Toronto when Claude Provost scores 16-33 into sudden death overtime. Montreal wins Game 1 of the finals 3-2 on Jan Conyers' late goal. The Canadiens beat the Hawks 2-0 in Game 2 as Gump Worsley records the shutout. The Hawks draw even in the series with a pair of home ice wins 3-1 and 5-1, but the Canadiens take Game 5 with a 6-0 shelling of Glenn Hall at the Montreal Forum. Game 6 sees Ralph Backstrom give Montreal a second period lead, but Moose Vasco and Doug Moens score to give Chicago a 2-1 win and tie the series at 3-3. Jean Belveau scores 14 seconds into Game 7 at Montreal, and Gump Worsley stops everything the Hawks throw at him as the Habs win 4-0 for their 12th Stanley Cup. Jean Belveau's 16 points pace the Habs, and he wins his first Conn Smythe trophy as playoff MVP. Bobby Hull wins his first Hart Trophy, edging out goal-scoring champ Norm Ullman. Bobby Hull wins his first and only Lady Byng Trophy. For the first time, the Vezina Trophy is awarded to 2 goalies as Toronto netminders Terry Sawchuk, 36 games, and Johnny Bower, 34 games, share the honor. Roger Crozier, runner-up for the Vezina, wins the Calder Trophy. He finished ahead of the 23-goal scorer Ron Elias in Toronto. Pierre Pilote, Chicago's blue line specialist, captures his 3rd straight Norris Trophy. Michigan Tech claims the NCAA Hockey Championship, crushing Boston College 8-2 in the finals. Tech forward Gary Milroy is named tournament MVP. In 1964-65, the NHL announced a new trophy named for Maple Leafs legend Conn Smythe to be presented to the most valuable player of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The trophy's first recipient was Montreal center Jean Belveau, who led his Canadiens to their 12th playoff championship with 8 goals and 16 points. Smythe, who was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1958, was a coach, manager, president, and owner of the Leafs during his career. In 1964-65, the Rangers didn't have much to brag about, finishing out of the playoffs and 18 games under 500. However, their future was full of hope as youngsters Rod Gilbert, who led the team in scoring 25 goals, 36 assists, and 61 points, and Vic Hadfield began to assert themselves. The Rangers also debuted the NHL's first Swedish import, a 6'2" left winger named Ulf Sterner, who played just 4 games in a Rangers sweater and was held without a goal or assist. While the NHL's conservative bloc, led by President Clarence Campbell, preached in favor of the status quo, Young Turks pushed even harder for expansion. Much of the rumbling came from California, where Los Angeles and San Francisco had to settle for spots in the Western Hockey League. The NHL just wouldn't let them in. In the spring of 1962, columnist Jim Murray of the Los Angeles Times wrote, "The National Hockey League makes a mockery of its title by restricting its franchises to 6 teams, waging a kind of private little tournament of 70 games just to eliminate 2 teams. Other big money sports are expanding," he continued, "but hockey likes it there in the back of the cave. Any businessman will tell you that in a dynamic economy, you either grow or perish. Baseball had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of its rut. Football groped its way to the end of a short rope. Hockey just can't sit there in the dark forever, braiding buggy whips." At the same time, Harold Ballard, one of the owners of the Maple Leafs, said, "If the right kind of people come to us with $5 million and the right kind of plans, we'll listen. We'd be crazy not to." By the mid-1960s, rumblings from the West Coast were edging toward the seismic. Coley Hall, owner of the San Francisco Seals, said, "The time has come for the NHL to realize that Los Angeles and San Francisco can't wait. Our hockey fans are just as major league conscious as fans of baseball and football and feel they should be right up there. An angry feeling is developing." NHL power brokers anticipated the threat but were distracted by their cash cow and the glittering performances of so many stars. In addition to Bobby Hull, who won the 65-66 scoring crown and the Hart Trophy, New York's Jean Rattel, Rod Gilbert, and Harry Howell, and Detroit's Roger Crozier were among the headline grabbers who filled NHL arenas to 95% capacity. But finally, on March 11, 1965, at a special meeting of club owners in New York's Plaza Hotel, the NHL Lords decided to make the big step. They announced the formation of a second 6-team division, saying they had begun evaluating applications from responsible groups. In February 1966, the NHL officially accepted Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Minneapolis-St. Paul as the members of the new division. St. Louis was a surprise since representatives had not filed a formal application. Buffalo and Baltimore had been rejected, so had Vancouver, and this rankled many Canadians. After all, here were 6 additions to the NHL, and not one city was located in the country that was the cradle of hockey. Expansion talk was so incessant that it deflected attention from the Stanley Cup Championship, which again was won by the Canadiens, this time in a 6-game final with Detroit. The NHL rules that teams must dress 2 goaltenders for every contest. The NHL announces plans for a 6-team expansion in 1967-68. The Hall of Fame nominates 12 inductees, including Marty Berry, Clint Benedict, Sid Howe, Bill Mosienko, and Red Horner. The last preseason All-Star game is played and the mid-season format is adopted for the 1966-67 season. The NHL casts a new trophy in honor of Lester Patrick to be awarded to a player, coach, official, executive, or referee who gives outstanding service to hockey in the United States. Mario Lemieux is born October 5, 1965 in Montreal. On the same day, Patrick Waugh is born in Quebec City, Quebec. On November 27, 1965, Detroit's Gordie Howe beats Montreal's Gump Worsley for his 600th career goal. The Rangers drop goalies Jacques Plante and Marcel Paille in favor of Eddie Jacquemin, Cesar Maniago, and Don Simmons. The Bruins debut a pair of talented rookie goalies, Bernie Parent and Jerry Cheevers. Toronto's Carl Brewer, 27, retires when his contract negotiation with GM Punch Imlach stall. He'll remain out of action for 4 years. The Maple Leafs swap fading star Andy Bathgate to Detroit for old-timer Marcel Pronovost, a 15-year Red Wing veteran. Montreal goes 41-21-8 to finish in first place, 8 points ahead of second place Chicago. In Chicago, Bobby Hull sets a pair of NHL records, most goals 54 and points 97 in a single season. Toronto's Frank Mahovlich, 32 goals, is a distant second to Bobby Hull in the goal-scoring race. Detroit's Norm Ullman and Alex Del Vecchio tie for third with 31. Stan Mikita in Montreal's Bobby Rousseau tie for second in points with 78. Montreal's Jean Beliveau finishes with 77. Gordie Howe tallies 75. Stan Mikita, Bobby Rousseau, and Jean Beliveau tie for the league lead in assists with 48. Gordie Howe has 46. Bobby Hull 43 to make the top 5. New York's Reg Fleming, acquired from Boston, leads the league in penalty minutes with 166. The Canadiens boast the finest defense in the league, 173 goals against, behind the goaltending of Gump Worsley and Charlie Hodge. Chicago is the most potent scoring team in the NHL, 240 goals. Toronto's Johnny Bower wins his third straight goals against title, 2.25, as the Leafs finish third in the standings. Detroit takes the fourth playoff spot by 26 points over fifth place Boston, as goalie Roger Crozier ironically leads the league both in shutouts with 7 and losses with 24. The playoffs feature Montreal versus Toronto, Detroit versus Chicago. The Hawks and the Red Wings meet in the semis for the fourth straight year. After the Hawks take a 2-1 series lead, the Red Wings reel off 3 straight victories, outscoring the Hawks 13-6 to advance to the finals. The Canadiens, defending Cup champs, have no trouble with Toronto sweeping the Leafs in 4 games, outscoring them 15-6. In the finals, Detroit takes Game 1 3-2 on Paul Henderson's third period winner. The Wings follow up with a 5-2 thrashing of the Habs in Game 2. The Canadiens fight back in Game 3 as Gilles Tremblay scores a pair and Habs win 4-2. Game 4 is tied 1-1 until Ralph Backstrom wins it for Montreal, 6:23 to play in the third period. 5 different Habs score in Game 5 as Montreal rolls to a 5-1 win. Game 6 of the finals goes to overtime, tied 2-2. Montreal's Henry Richard, mirroring the OT heroics of his big brother Maurice, scores the cup-clinching goal at 2:20 of the first extra period. The Canadiens win their 13th Stanley Cup, taking the all-time lead over Toronto, who has 12. Detroit goalie Roger Crozier wins the Conn Smythe, while teammate Norm Ullman wins the playoff scoring race with 15 points. Chicago's Bobby Hull captures his second straight Hart Trophy, beating out runner-up John Beliveau. Alex Delvecchio, Detroit's veteran center, wins the Lady Byng Trophy. Gump Worsley and Charlie Hodge, Montreal's ace goalies, share the Vezina Trophy. Toronto's Britt Selby wins the Calder Trophy over Detroit's Burt Marshall. Montreal's Jacques Laperriere cops the Norris Trophy. Jack Adams wins the first Lester Patrick Trophy. Michigan State beats Clarkson 6-1 in the NCAA Finals as MSU goalie Gay Cooley is named tournament MVP. In 1965-66, the NHL premiered a new achievement award, the Lester Patrick Trophy. Patrick, whose New York Rangers teams finished out of the playoffs just once in his first 16 years as manager, went into nets at age 44 during the 1928 Stanley Cup Finals. The award for outstanding service to hockey in the United States first went to Detroit legend Jack Adams. On March 2, 1966, Bobby Hull notched his 50th goal of the season against Detroit's Hank Bassin, becoming the first player ever to reach the 50-goal plateau twice. Maurice Richard did it in 1944-45, Bernie Geoffrion in 60-61, and Hull, 61-62, had previously reached the mark once each. The Golden Jet then set 2 more records. He became the first player to score more than 50 goals in a season with 54, and he finished with an NHL record 97 points. Throughout most of the 1960s, Boston's beloved Bruins broke the hearts of loyal Beantown fans with some of the most dreadful hockey known to man. From 59-60 through 66-67, the Bruins finished 5th twice and 6th 6 times. The salvation Boston's management insisted would be a wonder kid defenseman from Parry Sound, Ontario, named Bobby Orr. Orr had a quality that only a few brought to the game: charisma. He could skate upwards of 27 miles an hour and created the illusion of a Mercury on skates. Big league scouts noticed Orr before he reached his teens, and it was Boston that made the decisive move. After watching Orr play as a 12-year-old, the Bruins put his name on their protected list, meaning Orr was their top property. That done, the Bruins waited for Bobby to mature. Orr's ripening as a hockey star was faster than anyone could imagine. By the time he was 16, he had become the talk of Canada. Meanwhile, the Bruins began to tout Orr as the eventual messiah who would save the franchise. But then Orr shook the NHL establishment because he did what neither Gordie Howe nor Rocket Richard had done when they were invited to the bigs. Bobby brought an agent with him. His representative, Toronto attorney Alan Eagleson, stunned Bruins manager Hap Emms by declaring that Orr would not come to Boston unless he was rewarded with a contract commensurate with the ability. Emms eventually gave in. The result was a 2-year, $150,000 contract that caused reverberations throughout the league. Orr's eventual impact on the Bruins would be immense, as he would help transform them into a dynastic juggernaut. By 1970, Orr would become the biggest drawing card in the game. Bobby said Eagleson is the only player capable of filling every rink in the NHL. The Orr effect, as his style came to be known by analysts, had a profound impact on the manner in which hockey was played. Before Bobby donned a Bruins uniform, defensemen concentrated on defense. While there were rushing backliners of note in the past, Eddie Shore and Red Kelly being the most prominent, none of them influenced a major change in the mode of play. But Orr did. Bobby's idea of playing defense was to poke the puck away from the foe, then carry it the length of the rink for either a shot on goal or a pass to a teammate. In no time at all, every Canadian kid wanted to be Bobby Orr. Orr didn't carry Boston to a playoff berth in his rookie season of 1966-67. The Bruins finished last while Chicago was on top and Toronto won the Stanley Cup, but his impact was irrevocable. Bobby won the Calder Trophy, although New York's Harry Howell took the Norris Trophy as best defenseman. At the awards lunch in 1967, Howell accepted his prize and said, "I am glad I won the Norris Trophy this year because in 10 years it will be the Bobby Orr Trophy." The NHL rules that substitutions will now be allowed on coincidental major penalties. The NHL sponsorship of junior teams ends and all players not on NHL lists are eligible for the amateur draft. Los Angeles, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Oakland are awarded NHL franchises for 1967-68. The Hall of Fame names 10 inductees, including Max Bentley, Toe Blake, Butch Bouchard, Frank Brimsek, Ted Kennedy, Elmer Locke, Ted Lindsay, Bay Pratt, Ken Reardon, and Clarence Campbell. Boston installs a new coach as GM Milt Schmidt steps down in favor of Harry Sinden. The Bruins debut an 18-year-old defenseman who will revolutionize the game and bring greatness to Boston. His name, of course, is Bobby Orr. Chicago leads the league with a 41-17-12 record, finishing 17 points in front of second-place Montreal. The Blackhawks set an NHL record for total goals with 264. Chicago's Bobby Hull leads the NHL in goals with 52. He becomes the first player to record back-to-back 50-goal seasons. The top three NHL goal scorers are Blackhawks, as Bobby Hull's 52 goals are followed by Stan Mikita's 35 and Ken Warham's 31. Stan Mikita wins his third scoring title, tying Bobby Hull's NHL record with 97 points. Hull is second this year with 80. Stan Mikita leads the NHL in assists with 62, while New York's Phil Goyette is second, 49. Detroit's Norm Ullman finishes third in the league in points with 70, ties for third in assists with 44. Chicago's Dennis DeJordy, who pushed ahead of Glenn Hall as the team's number one goalie, leads the NHL in goals against average, 2.46. Terry Sawchuk records 15 of Toronto's 32 victories as the Leafs, coached briefly by King Clancy, maintain their hold on third place. The surprising Rangers finish fourth on the goaltending of Ed Jockman, who leads the NHL in wins with 30 and shutouts with 9. Ex-Habs star Bernie Geoffrion comes out of retirement, scores 17 goals in 58 games for the Rangers. Bernie Geoffrion is suspended for 3 games for throwing an elbow at a linesman. Montreal's John Ferguson is banned for 3 games for hitting another linesman. The playoffs feature Chicago versus Toronto and Montreal versus New York. The Rangers, who have missed the playoffs 7 of the last 8 years, are no match for the Habs. Montreal wins the first 3 games. The Canadiens advance to the finals when tough guy John Ferguson, the 1966-67 penalty minutes leader, scores at 6:28 of sudden death in Game 4. Chicago is favored in the semifinal series against Toronto, but the Hawks go down 2-1 before eking out a 4-3 win in Game 4. The Leafs beat Chicago in Game 5 and 6 to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Canadiens win Game 1 of the Finals 6-2. Henry Richard tallies 3 goals. Toronto's Johnny Bower, taking over for Terry Sawchuk, and the Maple Leafs goal, deflects every shot. Game 2 wins 3-0. Game 3 goes to sudden death, tied 2-2. Toronto's Bob Pulford scores the winner 8:26 into double overtime. In Game 4, Ralph Backstrom and John Belveau each score twice as Montreal wins 6-2. The Leafs then shock the Habs in Montreal, winning Game 5 4-1. In Game 6, Toronto's Jim Pappen scores at 19:58 of the second period, and the Leafs skate off with a 3-1 victory. Toronto claims its 13th Stanley Cup, tying Montreal. Toronto's Dave Keon is awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy. Jim Pappen leads all playoff scorers in goals with 7 and points with 15, and Johnny Bower notches a 1.67 goals against average. Stan Mikita wins the Art Ross, Hart, and Lady Byng trophies, becoming the first to pull off the sweep. Chicago's Glenn Hall and Dennis DeJordy share the Vezina Trophy. Bobby Orr, with 13 goals and 41 points, captures the Calder Trophy. Harry Howell, the longtime Rangers stalwart on the blue line, wins his only Norris Trophy. Cornell beats Boston University 4-1 in the NCAA hockey finals. Cornell defenseman Wally Stanowski is named tournament MVP. The Toronto Marlboros win their 4th Memorial Cup as Canada's top junior team. The Blackhawks reigned supreme over the NHL in 1966-67, largely due to the play of Stan Mikita. After building a reputation as a stick man with a dirty streak, Mikita underwent a 180-degree transformation. While winning his 3rd scoring title in 1966-67, tying Bobby Hull's NHL points record of 97, the former brawler sat out only 12 minutes and won the Art Ross, Hart, and Lady Byng trophies. In 1966-67, Chicago's premier left-winger Bobby Hull continued his domination of the NHL by leading the league in goals for the 5th time in 8 seasons. The Golden Jet, teaming with playmaker extraordinaire Stan Mikita, notched 52 goals, his 2nd consecutive season with more than 50, and became the first NHLer ever to record 3 50-goal campaigns. Hull was 2nd overall in scoring behind Mikita with 80 points. The NHL's decision to balloon from 6 to 12 teams in 1967-68 made a few ice moguls nervous. Some doubted that the cities such as St. Louis and Oakland could sustain franchises over the long haul, while others questioned the method chosen by the establishment teams for stocking the new clubs. The approved plan called for each existing team to protect 1 goalie and 11 other players for the draft. When a team lost a player, it could fill its protected list with another player. This meant that if a team lost its 13th best player, it could put its 14th best on the protected list. If it lost its 15th best, then the 16th best could be protected. The system didn't seem to favor the league's new clubs. However, NHL President Clarence Campbell felt that an extended backup plan, which called for all teams to be able to protect 2 goalies and only 14 others for the 1968 and 69 drafts, would help in the equalization. The new teams won't have trouble picking out which 14 to protect, he said, but the older teams, they're going to have problems. I visualize definite improvement in the new teams by 1968-69 because of the backup plans. Campbell added, by 1970, they should have a glorious field day, and I hope they do. On June 6, 1967, the expansion draft was held in Montreal, and the new teams finally saw what they were getting for their $2 million initiation fees. When the cigar smoke had cleared, many observers felt the new clubs had been taken. After all, they had just paid $100,000 each for bodies that ordinarily, under the regular draft price, cost $30,000. Of course, the $2 million one not only received 20 players, but also got the chance to rake in attendance, radio, and TV revenues. Even the players had differing opinions. Forward Billy Hickey, drafted by the California Seals, soon to be renamed the Oakland Seals, said of the new owners they didn't get a fair shake. Of the 20 players each team drafted, only 6 or 7 are of NHL caliber. Later, toward the end of the season, Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Ed Van Impe reacted positively to the new division. Expansion was a good thing for hockey. It's hard to imagine that until this year, there were only 120 spots open for Major League Hockey players. Now it's 240. Expansion hasn't hurt. These guys are proving they belonged. By the conclusion of the season, expansion did indeed seem like a success. The new teams, with the exception of Oakland, were all contenders for the 4 playoff spots. While Philadelphia finished first with 73 points, Pittsburgh was 5th with 67 points. The 6 new teams went a somewhat respectable 40, 86, and 18 against the established clubs. The West Division playoffs were so closely played that all 3 series went to 7 games when St. Louis Blues bowed to mighty Montreal in 4 one-goal finals games, 2 of them in overtime. The creators of expansion could sit back and admire their artistic triumph. The NHL doubles in size from 6 teams to 12. Los Angeles, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, California, and Minnesota join the party. The expansion teams make up the West Division, while the original 6 comprise the East. Teams will play a 74-game schedule. Prior to the expansion draft, LA owner Jack Kent Cooke purchases the entire Springfield AHL club from Eddie Shore, giving the Kings a fully stocked farm team. The LA Kings select legendary goalie Terry Sawchuk with their first pick in the expansion draft. The New York Rangers move into the newly constructed Madison Square Garden, built directly above Manhattan's famous Penn Station. The Hall of Fame inducts 4 members, including Turk Broda, Neil Colville, Harry Oliver, and Red Story. Toronto ships Frank Mahovlich, Gary Unger, and Pete Stemkowski to Detroit for Norm Ullman, Paul Henderson, and Floyd Smith. Scotty Bowman, who will become one of the greatest coaches in NHL history, assumes the bench duties in St. Louis after Lynn Patrick gets the Blues off to a 4-10-2 start. On October 11, 1967, Montreal's Jean Beliveau scores his 400th NHL goal. On December 8, 1967, the California Seals changed their name to the Oakland Seals. On December 30th, 1967, CBS airs its first game of the week. It features LA and Philadelphia in the first ever game at the Los Angeles Forum. On January 13th, 1968, Minnesota North Star defenseman Bill Masterton is checked by Seals defensemen Larry Kahn and Ron Harris. Masterton flips backward and falls hard on his head. He dies 30 hours later of a brain injury. The death of Bill Masterton accelerates the movement towards helmets. The Canadiens, with Gump Worsley and Reggie Vachon on goal, win the East Division 42-22-10. The Rangers take second in the East largely because of goalie Eddie Jacquemin, who leads the NHL and wins with 36 and shutouts with 8. Rangers winger Roger Gilbert ties Detroit's Alex Delvecchio for second in the league in assists with 48, is fifth in total points with 77. The revamped Bruins, with Bobby Orr on defense, Phil Esposito at center, and Jerry Cheevers in goal, climb from 6th place to 3rd as Esposito leads the league in assists with 49 and is second in points with 84. Chicago falls from 1st place to 4th, even though Stan Mikita leads the league with 87 points. Mikita is second in the NHL in goals with 40 and 4th in assists with 47. Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita's line mate, leads the NHL in goals with 44 for the 6th time. Gordie Howe's 39 goals are 3rd best in the league, as are his 82 points, but the Wings are among the worst teams in the NHL. The Philadelphia Flyers go 31-32-11. They win the Clarence Campbell Trophy, symbolizing supremacy in the West Division. The Kings take second in the West, 1 point behind Philly, as Eddie Joel leads in points with 57. St. Louis gets 51 points from Red Berenson and 50 points from rookie Jerry Melnick and marches to a 3rd place finish. Minnesota takes the last playoff spot with an excellent power play and Cesar Maniago's strong goaltending. The Pittsburgh Penguins fail to make the playoffs, although 35-year-old Andy Bathgate leads all West Division scorers with 59 points. The Oakland Seals replace their first coach, Bert Olmsted, after 64 games and just 11 victories. St. Louis Barclay Plager, one of 3 Plager brothers in the NHL, leads the league with 153 penalty minutes. Montreal's Gump Worsley leads the NHL with a 1.98 goals against average. Toronto's Johnny Bower, at age 43, is second, 2.24. On March 3, 1968, John Belvo notches his 1,000th point. In the West playoffs, 3rd place St. Louis overcomes 1st place Philadelphia in 7 games, winning Game 3 in double overtime on Larry Keenan's goal. The 4th place North Stars drop the first 2 games of their quarterfinal series against the Kings, but they survive in 7. In the playoffs, 1st place Montreal sweeps 3rd place Boston 4-0, while 4th place Chicago upsets 2nd place New York 4-2. In the semifinals, the Canadiens make short work of Chicago, winning in 5 games. They take the series on Jacques Lemaire's overtime goal. The semifinal series between Minnesota and St. Louis goes 7 games, including 4 sudden death games, beginning in Game 2. Minnesota wins Game 2 3-2 when Parker McDonald scores in overtime. The Blues take a pair of thrillers in overtime, winning 4-3 on Gary Sabourin's goal in Game 4 and 3-2 on Bill McCreary's overtime goal. St. Louis' Ron Schock scores the series winner in double overtime of Game 7. A courageous St. Louis squad plays the Habs tough, losing Game 1 of the finals 3-2 in overtime on Jacques Lemaire's goal. The Canadiens manage a 1-0 win in Game 2 as Glenn Hall and Gump Worsley star in goal. Serge Savard scores in the 3rd period. In Game 3, Bobby Rousseau breaks a 3-3 score at 1:13 of overtime to put the Habs up 3-0 in the series. In Game 4, the Blues take 2-1 lead in the 3rd period, but Henry Richard ties it and J.C. Tremblay scores the cup winner with 8:20 on the clock. Glenn Hall is awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy. Chicago's Stan Mikita wins a trophy triple crown, the Art Ross, the Hart, and the Lady Byng. Montreal's Gump Worsley and Reggie Vachon share the Vezina. The Calder Trophy goes to flashy Bruin Derek Sanderson. Teammate Bobby Orr wins the first of his 8 straight Norris trophies. Montreal's Claude Provost wins the first Bill Masterton Trophy for perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. The Soviet Union takes the Olympic gold medal as it rolls to a 5-0 win over Canada in the decisive game. Denver wins the NCAA title with a 4-0 victory over North Dakota in the finals. Denver goalie Jerry Powers is the tournament MVP. Jack Kent Cooke, owner of the Washington Redskins football team, stepped into the hockey world when he was granted the Los Angeles Kings franchise in 1967. Cooke built the $16 million Forum in Inglewood, California, where the Kings, as well as the LA Lakers basketball team, would be based. Cooke went even further in his preparations for competing in the NHL, purchasing an entire Springfield team from Eddie Shore to use as his farm team. Built in the middle of Manhattan, the new Madison Square Garden, replacing the old version that stood for years in the middle of Hell's Kitchen, opened for business prior to the 1967-68 season, making a new home for the Rangers. To the dismay of fans and the designers, the sightlines were terrible. The game was out of reach of the audience, and the entire atmosphere was initially viewed as antiseptic. Alterations have since improved the site. The 1968 Winter Games featured a high-flying Soviet team that trounced the Americans 10-2 before winning the gold medal with a 5-0 thrashing of Canada. It was an omen of things to come as Soviet hockey program padded with soldiers who trained for hockey year-round emerged as a dominant power. When St. Louis was granted an NHL expansion franchise in 1967, it was suggested that Mound City might not be able to support the big league hockey. But the astute managing of Lynn Patrick and Scotty Bowman's clever coaching delivered a playoff berth and a trip to the finals. In 1968-69, the Blues established themselves as the premier expansion club both financially and artistically. Owner Sid Salomon Jr. ran a first-class organization, and his club was bolstered by solid trades. Patrick laid the cornerstone for success at two positions when he obtained center Red Berenson and defenseman Barclay Plager from the Rangers. He got each player for practically nothing. The goaltending of Glenn Hall was world-class. However, the 37-year-old needed help in the nets, and Bowman went scouting for another netminder. Scotty learned that Jacques Plante, who had retired in 1965 when his wife fell ill, wanted to make a comeback, so he drafted Jacques from the Rangers. "We both knew he could still play goal," Bowman said. After all, he hadn't quit because he couldn't do the job. But Bowman didn't stop there. Aware that left wing needed shoring up, he obtained Camille the Eel Henry and Ab McDonald. Finally, he added Billy Plager, the kid brother of the Blues Bob, and Barkley to the defense. Immediately, St. Louis staked its claim as the premier team in the West Division. They proposed, wrote Mark Mulvoy of Sports Illustrated, that on any given rink, they can damn well skate those cocky East teams right up into the stands. That's precisely what they did during 1 week in November. First, the Blues played the Bruins to a 1-1 tie on Boston Garden Ice. They next defeated New York 3-1 at Madison Square Garden, and then they tied Detroit 1-1 at Olympia Stadium. The Blues' success turned St. Louis into a raving hockey city. St. Louis Arena, built in 1929, but still a handsome edifice, often bulged with huge crowds. The Blues finished the season with a record of 37-25-14, winning the division by 19 points. Plante and Hall were both spectacular, posting goals against average close to .200 and winning the Vezina Trophy. Berenson led the West Division in scoring with 82 points. Playing a physical, intimidating brand of hockey, the Blues obliterated Philadelphia in 4-game opening round sweep, then swept the Los Angeles Kings in another 4-game affair. Once again, the Blues went head-to-head in the Stanley Cup round with the Montreal Canadiens. "I know it's going to be tough," said Bowman, "but we're proud of ourselves. You've really got to have something to win 8 straight games." However, the Canadiens had infinitely more scoring and more mobile defense, and they routed St. Louis in 4 straight games. The Blues had now dropped 8 finals games to Montreal, but St. Louis fans shrugged off the losses. Even though St. Louis hadn't conquered the NHL had conquered St. Louis. I'm Charlie Saunier from the Renegades of Puck, and this has been the 20th Century Hockey Chronicle. If you'd like to support more projects like this, please follow the Renegades of Puck on all social media platforms and also visit renegadesofpuck.com.